Welcome to the Cyber Tech Podcast, inside the minds of everyday IT and cyber pros. Your host, Mike Fierros, will dive deep into the world of IT and cybersecurity, bringing you the stories and insights of professionals who are making waves in the field. From how they got started, to their most exciting projects, and their advice for aspiring tech enthusiasts, we cover it all. So, whether you're an industry veteran or just getting started, join us as we explore the fascinating minds behind the technology that shapes our world. Let's get started.
Hey guys, how's it going? It's Mike again, Cyber Tech Podcast, inside the minds of everyday IT and cyber pros. And thanks guys for giving a shout out on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. I appreciate the feedback too. Appreciate you guys sending in questions on how to get to IT and cybersecurity. So as mentioned before in the last podcast, compiled a list of these questions I'll be asking the guests on the podcast, see what view is and answer is on these questions and whatnot. And shout out to the gentleman, forget his name now, but the gentleman who is currently in the trucking industry that wants to pivot into cybersecurity. For you guys in different industries right now, this podcast is definitely for you guys too, and also for those in the industries or in the fields. We'll definitely answer your question. Today's guest, this gentleman has been in the cybersecurity field for years. I actually sat on his class training, if you will, at a Cactus Con, which is a cybersecurity conference every February in Mesa, Arizona. And he was teaching on cloud security, which he's a professional at. And this gentleman also works for Recon InfoSec, and he's going to explain that a little more. And his name is Ben Webb. He's the manager of technology and engineering at Recon InfoSec. How's it going, Ben?
It's going great, Mike. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, Ben. Like when I was trying to figure out who to have on this podcast, and your name came up on one of the Thursday defensive training you guys have at Recon InfoSec, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna reach out to Ben, see if he's interested on LinkedIn. So I reached out to you, and I really appreciate it, Ben, but I learned a lot when you're talking about cloud security that you gave the talk at Cactus Con. And yeah, no, I appreciate taking your time out of your busy schedule, especially working in cybersecurity, and because anything can happen anytime, and we roll the punches and whatnot. But I appreciate your time, Ben.
Absolutely.
Let the listeners know a little bit about yourself and kind of your background.
Sure. I have been kind of in cybersecurity and IT for over 20 years now. I started pretty young, really kind of just as I was starting out adult life, I was getting into IT as well. Have been in and out of security roles, and then back into IT roles, and then back in security roles kind of throughout that process. I've worked at companies. Recon is kind of a smaller company. I've worked at other really small companies, even down to just me and the owner, all the way up to companies that have hundreds of thousands of people and hundreds of thousands of computers. So pretty wide breadth. I've seen a few different things in all different places. And I find myself playing, like the translator for how those environments work for people who've never seen them.
That's awesome, Ben. It sounds like you have a wealth of knowledge and just especially encompassing IT and cybersecurity, because I get folks ask me, what's the difference between IT, cybersecurity, and for you, Ben, what do you see as the big difference between the IT field and cybersecurity field?
It's cybersecurity in most of the jobs is really just an approach to IT. The most important things in security are really just doing IT well. So I think the difference is probably more intent than anything else. A lot of people who feel like they have a traditional IT role because they're in AD or they're managing O365 or they're doing Exchange or something like that are doing security. And they're in security, they maybe just don't know it. So I think the biggest difference really is just your mindset and how you're thinking about it.
I've had folks ask me, well, cybersecurity, security is cybersecurity professional's job. Well, on an IT team or whatever organization you're in, it's everybody's job. So everybody, it's a team oriented profession. And you're right, Ben. For those, for some folks, still in IT trying to pivot or trying to get into cybersecurity a little more. You're right. The IT professional is also responsible for security, making sure MFA is up and running and whatnot. And no, I think that's a good definition, explanation of that. Did you go into any schooling, Ben, before you got into these fields, or is this something that you kind of grew up in?
So my background's probably a little bit different, and I don't even know if it would work today.
Nice.
I didn't really do schooling. I did So I kind of started out doing like some phone support and then moving to desktop support. And during that process, I did some certifications. I did Microsoft MCSE.
Nice.
I borrowed a little bit of money from folks to take the tests and stuff because I was dirt poor at the time, just starting a family, and kind of parlayed that into a little bit better job, and then kind of worked my way from there. But I suffer no illusions that that's something everybody can do. I've been really lucky at
Mm.
various times. I've had some people who were willing to mentor me and support me that I just happened to meet. While I
Mm.
started out without really going the education route, I wouldn't necessarily tell somebody that that's not the best route.
No, that's interesting, Ben, that you went from phone support. When you were doing phone support, is that you doing phone support back then? Did you imagine yourself working in cybersecurity?
Kind of yes. And the reason I say that is that cybersecurity, and I should say really just hacker culture, is what
Mm.
really got me into IT, not the other way
Mm.
around. I was like playing computer games and stuff like that, and interested in computers enough that I wanted to own one and see what I could do with it. But what really got me pushing hard into like what are all the things I can do on a computer, and I really want to understand how this works and how that works and all the details, was getting into like I saw war games because I'm old enough that it was that and not
Oh, okay.
hackers. And I was like,
Nice.
that's the coolest thing in the whole world. I want to go
Mm.
do that. And so I started doing BBSs and stuff like that, and
Nice.
kind of immersed into that stuff. And not that I was ever any good at it or did anything notable. It did kind of, that was where my passion for technology came from, more so than games and stuff like that.
When you were doing phone support, were you working like on premise with a company?
Yeah. This
Okay.
was in the days like when you wanted to do your taxes, you download, like you bought software at the store from H&R Block or TaxCut or whatever, and you installed it on your PC.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
Okay.
like way back when, right? And so I
Yeah.
was like help desk support for that kind of software.
Yeah. For those of you, not really understanding what Ben's mentioning, there was, especially for those who are younger, there was software out there. I don't know if they still even have it,
Mm-mm.
but you would purchase it at like a Walmart or like a Target or even Kmart when they were
Yep.
still open, and you would purchase it, install on your computer and do your taxes that way. But now, because of cloud, it just revolutionized everything, and you don't really need a lot of hardware stuff like that. But no, that's awesome. Ben, can you explain a little bit more? Because I have had a lot of, especially younger folks, they like the idea of working remotely,
Hmm.
and they don't. Some of them don't really understand. How can you work remotely doing IT, or how can you work remotely working cybersecurity? Like for example, for MSP, for MSSP,
Hmm.
can you explain the little bit difference between working on premise with like an IT team or cybersecurity team versus working for MSP or MSSP?
Sure. Working remotely is the easiest thing in the world now. I've worked at a lot of, well, I shouldn't say a lot, but a couple of different remote first companies. And in both cases, it was where we had customers that were like, one was a SaaS company, and now, of course, I'm at Recon InfoSec, and we have
Mm.
customers all over the country that we're providing services to. But what we don't have is like a data center that people have to walk into and touch computers very often.
Mm.
So there's not any value or anything gained by being on premise in an office when most of your time is spent working with your customers, whose office you're not going to be in anyway, helping with them with their problems and making sure that their stuff is working the way it's supposed to. Contrast that, and this is definitely more common when you're working at like a central company. I was in financial for a long time. Most of the people, like all of your customers, are there in that building, along with all your colleagues. And you do have a data center where you have computers that you need to walk in and touch sometimes. So it makes, in those cases, sometimes more sense to be walking in and actually meeting with people and talking with them. But I would tell you, especially since the pandemic and everything, even those companies, most of the time when I would go into the office, I would go into the office so I could get on a Zoom call or whatever technology we used, to talk to other people who were in other buildings or at home or in a different city. So anymore, it probably makes more sense to be remote. But I will also say that having done both quite a bit, remote has its own challenges. It's not just a panacea. It doesn't solve every problem. You have to be pretty deliberate in how you manage your day-to-day time. so that you're not burning yourself out and so that you're still being effective for, your work and your employer and everything like that too.
Myself, I work remotely too, and it was challenging at first, especially not being on prem and not talking to users face to face, and figuring out how to do certain things remotely. But yeah, you're spot on, Ben. Like it could be challenging trying to that work life balance, because if you like you have a home office and you're off duty, as you will, you tend to come back and say, hey, let me see if I got that email, or let me see if this update's done, or this
Right.
firewall's firmware is updated, or whatever it may be. So you're right, Ben. Like you're tempted to do stuff like that, but no, you're right. I think working remotely does have its benefits, as far as like you could, as long as you're doing your workload and doing the job you're supposed to be doing, not getting distracted, stuff like that. Remote jobs are really really good, especially for those that want to pivot into IT and or cybersecurity.
Right.
Um, and Ben, I remember I sat in your talk on cloud security at Cactus Con. How did you start to get into those events, as far as like going to Cactus Con, or maybe you speak at other
Mm.
cybersecurity conferences? How did you get involved with that?
I got involved with that. I used to live in Kansas City, and a shout
Awesome.
out to all my friends at Sec KC. I got involved with Sec KC, and it really turned me on to how awesome like the conferences and meetups and stuff could be. So
Nice.
yeah, I went to a few of those meetups and really kind of got a taste for it and started to volunteer there. And then I volunteered with B-Sides in Kansas City. And I've always enjoyed public speaking. It was a little bit of a challenge after the pandemic. Like the first time I did a talk after the pandemic was actually at a Set KC meeting. It was a longer version to some degree of the same thing that you saw. Probably a more relaxed but also chaotic version as well. I remember coming back like when I first sat down to do that talk and looking around the room, I'm like, oh wow, that's a lot of people. I haven't seen this many people in a long time. So it definitely took some work to get back into the swing of it.
What would you say to someone that's never been to IT, or even a cybersecurity conference? What would you
Mhm.
say for that person the first time going? How would you kind of prep them, as far as like what talks to sit in, and stuff like that?
So I would say don't make DEF CON the first one you go to. Find something that's local. B-Sides conferences are great, or a conference like
Mm,
Cactus Con, kind of a regional, more
for sure.
is a fantastic way to start. And a lot of people will say, "Oh, you should just go and talk to people." Well, not everybody's well equipped to do that. Not everybody's comfortable doing that. But go
Yeah.
and explore a bit. Most of them, especially if they're going to record the talks, don't feel like you have to sit through all the talks.
Mm,
Go look around and see what else is there and kind of see what people are doing. There's usually opportunities to learn things, like sectors of computing you've never messed with. A lot of them will
mm,
have, like Cactus Con did, a lab for doing offensive security type things. If you've never done that, you have an opportunity to explore a little bit. If you're comfortable, chat with folks. If they're doing something that you don't know anything about, ask them about it. Most folks I've met in IT or cybersecurity are super excited to talk about the things they know. So give them that
mm,
opportunity and you can learn some things with them. I've never felt terribly judged. I know everybody's like scared of it, right? You go there and like, well, I'm not going to know everything everybody else knows. And that's
mm.
true, 100%, but they're not going to know everything you know. Sometimes, you teach things or even just by having the discussion, you help someone think something out in a different way just by asking a question they haven't heard before.
Remember going there with two friends of mine, and they've never been there. But
Mhm.
it was awesome to go different talks. I met one of the gentlemen that has Darknet Diaries, and I forget the guy's name. I think Jack Reissider.
Yeah.
Met him right there. That was a huge surprise. If you guys don't know Darknet Diaries, go check it out in your podcast platform, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you hear podcasts. Check out Darknet Diaries. That's definitely going to help you guys, as far as listening to these hacker stories and whatnot, cybersecurity stories. So that's definitely beneficial. But you meet these people. Like I said on your talk, I remember on your talk, Ben. I remember I met a gentleman next to me. He was older and a lot more experienced than I am, and I was kind of chit chatting with him along with my friends, and it's pretty cool. Like I found myself talking to people and going out to people and just kind of introducing myself. And yeah, you're right, Ben. Like people are super friendly. You meet different people from different, different companies and stuff like that, and exchange a couple LinkedIn's there and stuff like that. And it's super beneficial. Guys, yeah, definitely check out wherever you're listening to, around your region, wherever state or even country listening to this. See if there's any local or regional cybersecurity conferences. And, just like Ben said, just check them out, meet people, explore, participate in the classes, and that's definitely help you guys out.
And the thing I would add to that is even if
Sure.
you're like in IT, you're a sysadmin or you spend all day, creating accounts in Active Directory or something like that, definitely a good place to go. Even if you're not trying to pivot into cybersecurity, you're not trying to be, a pen tester or doing the engineering that I do or whatever, you're going to learn things that are extremely applicable to your job. A lot of those conferences are talking about the deep internals of how Active Directory actually works, or how Azure actually works, or how AWS actually works. And all of those things are super helpful just in a normal IT context as well as a security context.
That's a really good point, Ben. That's having, brushing up on your skills and learning more on the cybersecurity end, especially for like sysadmins and stuff like that. That's definitely gonna be some good information to take with you and for their positions and whatnot. What's your favorite project to date, Ben? Like projects you worked on in the past? What's your kind of, when people ask you, hey, what's the best thing you've done so far in IT cybersecurity? What would you tell them?
So I'll leave the ones that I have done like for work out of it, just because I don't think that,
For sure.
that's not always stuff I can disclose. But
For
I
sure.
think the coolest one I've done actually was part of that talk. I created all the Terraform for doing root user notifications.
Nice.
So one of the things in AWS that you're always supposed to do is set up alarms for when the root user is used, because the root user should pretty much never be used.
Mm.
But like, there's not an easy way to do that. It's actually, there's like about six different things you have to set up, and you have to connect them all the right way. And if you don't, none of it works. So I created some basically just Terraform and automation to put all that together, and I was pretty pleased that I was able to get that effective and working.
For those that don't know AWS, can you kind of briefly explain that, Ben?
Sure. When you create a new AWS account, you put in an email address and a credit card. Those are the first two things
Mm.
you have to get AWS rolling. And that email address becomes the root user and has the ultimate power in that environment. So anytime you
Mm.
sign in as that root user, it means that you can do literally everything. The problem with that is that you don't really want a user like that rolling around. So, AWS's strong recommendation is that you go in and you create another user for yourself to log in as, and then you kind of lock that root user away. But compromising that root user is also the most important thing an attacker can do, because then you can't really expel them out of the environment anymore. So what AWS will recommend, and everybody else, every security professional that you talk to should recommend this, is once you've created that other account, then you put some kind of alarm on the root user, so that anytime someone logs in as that or anything happens as that, you get notified, whether it's a push notification on your phone or it's SMS or it's an email or whatever it is. Something clues you that somebody's touching that root user, so that you can address the situation right away. Or you can say, yeah, that was me and I was expecting it.
That's really good to know, especially for those that want to pursue something like that. That's a good nugget right there. Because yeah, you definitely don't want to have a super user admin account that anybody could just go in there and whatnot. And you definitely want to lock down any unnecessary admin accounts and whatnot. That's really good advice right there, Ben. I have a question actually from a gentleman that hit me up on LinkedIn, and he's essentially was conversing back and forth. He's in the trucking industry. He has no IT experience whatsoever, no cybersecurity, no IT experience. And he says, for someone with a cybersecurity certificate but no hands-on IT experience, what advice would you give them to break into the industry? What steps should they take to they make themselves more appealing to employers?
Okay, that's awesome, because I actually used to work with a guy who was an IT manager who had been a trucker his whole
Oh,
family.
nice.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, I talked to him about it because he had like a big Peterbilt background on his computer. I'm like,
Oh,
well, that's
there we go.
interesting. And yeah. What I would say, a couple of things. might find yourself starting with what's more traditionally seen as an IT role, because that opening path is a little bit easier sometimes.
Mm.
Working like server support or desktop support or something like that. Like I said before, a lot of security is a matter of intent and not necessarily a matter of title. So you can still learn a lot of very security relevant things and have a lot of very security relevant experience from a quote unquote regular IT job. The other thing I would say is build a home lab and start testing things out. Start exploring a little bit more to understand what you find interesting and what you want to focus on. Cybersecurity is a great field in that it has many, many different facets and there's lots of different things you can do, and they all inform each other. So like I've done some offensive security and pen testing stuff as a fun hobby on the side. It helps me be better at the engineering and at the defensive type of stuff that I do with Recon. Keep exploring those kinds of things and kind of remember the projects that you've done, write those out and include them on your resume, especially while you're starting. Like, here's projects I've worked on, here's things that I've built, here's software that I have created in a lab in my basement or in my cloud instance or wherever. And configured and used, and here's what I've learned from that. That is super helpful, especially when you're starting. And if you're applying at a more traditional cybersecurity company, Recon, or like any of the cybersecurity focused companies, they're going to see that and see that as someone who's making more effort on their own to learn and to round themselves out versus someone who just took some classes and then said, "Here, hire me."
No, I think that's really good. Especially with no experience or anything like that. Like Ben said, guys, these home labs you could do IT, and I'm gonna probably beat this to the dead horse on this podcast, but yeah, in IT cybersecurity, it's your experience does matter, and tinkering with things like cloud platforms, even tinkering with a physical computer or virtual machine. These are definitely going to help you because you're kind of poking around, seeing what's going on. You kind of you're fueling your curiosity about things, but these home labs and these testing environments are going to definitely help you in the real world when you do get that the IT position, you do get that cybersecurity position. Is that something you guys look for, Ben, when your guys look shuffling around, like you're shuffling around applications? Is that something you look more for as versus something like maybe a degree?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I'm a little bit privileged, or I'm a lot privileged in being at Recon because we don't focus a lot on degrees and certificates and
Mm-hmm.
things. We focus more on the person and how they work and the kinds of things that they do. And I'm actually looking at, I have an opening right now for an engineering position, and 100% I'm looking more like when someone says, "Hey, I built a home lab." And I've taken whatever classes I've taken, and then I built a home lab, and I've done Security Onion, or I've created a Pi hole, or whatever
Mm-hmm.
they've done. That's a much more compelling thing. And if it's even more compelling when they say, "Well, I've set up a Pi hole or Security Onion or Elk Stack or whatever at home, and then here is what I did that was different with that, or here's how I automated it, or here's." How I put a spin on that beyond just installing a package and then looking at it.
That's some good nuggets for you guys right there, as Ben mentioned. Be curious about certain things, especially these home labs. It's definitely going to help you on your resumes. Add these to the resumes. Get that experience at home, and you heard it from Ben. That's what employers are looking for, especially going into cybersecurity, even IT. So encouraging guys to do that. Home labs are really good. Take certifications too. Ben, if someone wants to get a hold of you, to get a little guidance or ask you some questions, how to get into cybersecurity, where can they reach you?
The best place by far is Mastodon. I'm Ben from KC on Infosec Exchange. Also, I'm on LinkedIn, but not as often. I don't check LinkedIn on a daily basis or sometimes even a weekly basis. So I'm always happy to respond, but it might be a little bit delayed. Mastodon, I usually check, a few times a day though.
Nice, and I'll make sure I'll put that in the show notes right there. That way, guys, if you want to get a hold of Ben or have any questions on as far as the IT cybersecurity fields, he could definitely be happy to answer your guys' questions. And thanks, Ben, for being on this podcast, man. Like I said, when I heard your talk on cloud security, and I was itching to do a podcast like this, and I was like, you know what, I'm want to reach out to Ben. I really appreciate that, Ben. I'm really honored to have you on this podcast.
Well, thank you so much. I'm honored to be here. It's been great. I appreciate it.
For sure, you're welcome. This is the Cyber Tech Podcast, inside the minds of everyday IT and cyber pros. You listen to Ben Webb on episode number 5. He's the manager of technology and engineering at Recon InfoSec. See you guys.